Part 1: The darkness of space held no mercy for the weak. The Crithian fleet had proven this truth across dozens of human colonies. Their ships moved like predators through the stars, leaving only death behind them. For 3 long months, humanity had watched their outer worlds burn. Every desperate call for help ended in static. Every defense fleet sent to protect the colonies was destroyed before they could fire a single shot. Commander Vexath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. His 3 eyes watched the screens with cold satisfaction. Below his ship, the human colony of New Terra spun peacefully. 5 million humans lived on that world. They had no idea what was coming. The Crithians had done this before. They knew exactly how it would end. "Scan the planet," Vexath ordered. His voice clicked and hissed in the language of his people. "Find their defenses." The sensor officer worked quickly. His claws tapped against the control panel. After a moment, he looked up. "Commander, they have nothing. A few orbital platforms, some outdated missiles. Nothing that can stop us." Vexath's mandibles spread in what his species considered a smile, exactly as expected. "These humans are children playing at war. They have no concept of real power." He turned to his weapons officer. "Prepare the bombardment. We will start with their capital city." The Crithian fleet moved into position. 300 warships, each one carrying enough firepower to level a continent. They had been built over centuries of conquest. The Crithians were an old race. They had destroyed civilizations that humans had never even heard of. This would be easy, but something changed on the sensors. A new signal appeared. "Commander," the sensor officer called out. His voice held confusion. "Something is coming." From behind their moon, Vexath looked at the display. A single dot was moving toward them. "Just one ship." He almost laughed. "The humans send one vessel against our entire fleet? How brave. How foolish. Commander, the mass readings are unusual. This ship is very large." "How large?" The officer checked his instruments twice. "Larger than our flagship, Commander." "Much larger." Vexath felt a moment of uncertainty. Then he pushed it away. "It does not matter. One ship cannot fight 300. Maintain formation. Let them come to us. We will teach them what happens to those who challenge the Crithian Empire." The human ship kept coming. As it emerged from behind the moon, the Crithian sensors finally got a clear reading. The tactical officer stood up from his station. His voice was tight with worry. "Commander, this vessel is massive, 3 times the size of the Eternal Dominion. The hull composition is unknown. Energy readings are higher than anything in our database." Now Vexath felt real concern. The Crithians had detailed intelligence on human technology. They were supposed to be primitive, centuries behind Crithian advancement. How could they build something like this? "Get me more information," Vexath demanded. "What kind of weapons does it carry?" "Unknown, Commander. The ship is unlike anything we have seen before." On the bridge of the human ship, Captain Jack Monroe watched the alien fleet with steady eyes. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm features. He had served in the human navy for 30 years. He had fought pirates and smugglers. He had rescued colonies from disasters, but he had never faced anything like this. Around him, his crew worked quietly. They were young, most of them. This was their first real battle. But they had trained for months. They knew their ship. They knew what it could do. "Distance to the enemy?" Monroe asked. Lieutenant Amy Fisher checked her navigation console. She was a small woman with bright red hair tied back in a tight bun. 40,000 kilometers, Captain. We'll be in weapons range in 5 minutes." Monroe nodded. "How are our systems?" Chief Engineer Peter Hayes answered from his station near the back of the bridge. He was a big man with oil stains on his uniform. "Everything is running perfectly, Captain. The reactor is at full power. Shields are charged. All weapons are ready to fire." Monroe took a deep breath. He looked at the massive fleet on his screen. 300 ships, the entire Crithian armada, and 1 human battleship. The odds seemed impossible. But Monroe knew something the Crithians did not. Humanity had been preparing. While the outer colonies fought and died, Earth had been building. The best scientists, the best engineers, the best military minds had come together. They had created something new. Something the galaxy had never seen. They called it the UHS Titan, and it represented humanity's answer to a simple question. How do you fight an enemy that is stronger, older, and more advanced? You innovate. You adapt. You find a new way. "Open a channel," Monroe ordered. "Let me talk to them." The communications officer activated the system. Monroe's voice was broadcast across all frequencies. The Crithian translator systems would pick it up instantly. "This is Captain Jack Monroe of the United Human Ship Titan. You have entered human space without permission. You have destroyed our colonies. You have killed our people. I am ordering you to withdraw immediately. Leave now and no more blood will be spilled. This is your only warning." On the Crithian flagship, Vexath heard the message. For a moment he was too surprised to respond. Then he started laughing. His officers joined in. The sound echoed through the bridge. "Did you hear that?" Vexath said between laughs. "They think they can order us to leave. They think one ship can make us afraid." He stopped laughing. His eyes went cold. "Show them what fear truly means. All ships prepare to fire. Target that human vessel. I want it destroyed." 300 warships powered up their weapons. Plasma cannons charged. Missile tubes loaded. Energy banks filled to capacity. The Crithians had enough firepower to destroy a small moon. They were about to use it all on one ship. Monroe watched the enemy fleet light up on his sensors. He had hoped they would listen. He had hoped they would understand. But hope was not enough. Not anymore. "They're preparing to fire, Captain," Lieutenant Fisher said quietly. Monroe's jaw tightened. "Then we fire first." He turned to his weapons officer. "Lieutenant Blake, target their flagship." "Main cannon." "Full power." Lieutenant Kevin Blake was a young man with steady hands. He had been the top of his class at the Naval Academy. He checked his targeting systems one last time. "Target locked, Captain. Main cannon is charged and ready." Monroe looked at the enemy flagship one last time. Somewhere on that ship, an alien commander thought he was invincible, thought humanity was weak. It was time to change his mind. Fire. The weapon that fired from the Titan was unlike anything the Crithians had ever seen. They expected plasma bolts or particle beams. They expected missiles or lasers. What they got was something far worse. The graviton cannon was humanity's greatest achievement. It had taken years to develop. Dozens of scientists had given their lives in testing accidents. But now it worked perfectly. The weapon projected a beam of artificial gravity. It could crush anything it touched at the molecular level. The beam was invisible to the naked eye. It crossed the space between the two ships in seconds. When it hit the Eternal Dominion, nothing seemed to happen at first. The massive Crithian flagship just hung there in space. Then it started to collapse. The hull crumpled inward like paper in a fist. Metal screamed as it was compressed. Decks folded into each other. The ship's reactor exploded, adding a brief flash of light to the destruction. Within 10 seconds, the flagship that had led the destruction of a dozen human colonies was reduced to a ball of crushed metal, barely 50 meters across. Silence fell across the Crithian fleet. Every commander, every officer, every crew member stared at their screens in disbelief. Their flagship was gone, just gone. One shot from the human ship had erased it from existence. Commander Vexath had been thrown from his chair when the ship began to die. His emergency escape pod had launched automatically. Now he tumbled through space, watching through the small window as his ship was destroyed. He could not believe what he was seeing. 300 years of Crithian superiority ended in 10 seconds. "All ships," Vexath screamed into his emergency communicator. "Attack! Kill that ship! Destroy it now!" The Crithian fleet scattered. Their careful formation broke apart as panic spread. But they were still warriors. Still trained soldiers. Hundreds of ships turned toward the Titan and opened fire. Space lit up like a star going nova. Plasma bolts by the thousands streaked toward the human battleship. Missiles followed, their engines burning bright. Energy beams lanced through the darkness. Every weapon in the Crithian arsenal was unleashed at once. The barrage hit the Titan's shields in a wave of destruction. The entire ship shook from the impact. Alarms blared across every deck. "Shields down to 70%, Chief Engineer Hayes called out. He watched his displays carefully. "They're hitting us with everything. But the shields are holding." Monroe gripped the arms of his command chair. "Return fire. All weapons. Show them what we can do." The Titan came alive. Railguns along its hull fired tungsten slugs at incredible speed. Each slug hit with the force of a nuclear weapon. Missile pods opened, launching hundreds of smart missiles that wove through the enemy formation like schools of fish. Point defense lasers created a web of light, destroying incoming missiles before they could hit. But the real terror came from the secondary graviton weapons. The Titan carried 12 smaller versions of the main cannon, They could not crush a ship into nothing like the big gun, but they could fire much faster. One by one, Crithian ships imploded. Their hulls collapsed. Their crews died instantly. Lieutenant Fisher watched her tactical screen. Red dots representing enemy ships were disappearing fast. Enemy formation is breaking apart, Captain. They're trying to reorganize. Do not let them, Monroe said firmly. Helm, take us straight into their formation. Keep firing. The Titan surged forward. Its massive engines pushed the enormous ship to speeds that seemed impossible. It smashed through the Crithian lines like a hammer through glass. Smaller ships that tried to intercept it were destroyed without slowing it down. On the Crithian command ship, Fleet Commander Zareth watched the battle with growing horror. He had taken command after Vexeth's flagship was destroyed. Now he was watching his entire fleet fall apart. Casualties? He demanded. 50 ships destroyed, Commander, his tactical officer reported. His voice shook. Another 30 badly damaged. The human ship is unstoppable. Zareth's mind raced. They could not defeat this ship in direct combat. Their weapons barely scratched its shields. Their best ships were being destroyed like toys. But every ship had weaknesses. Even this one. Change tactics, Zareth ordered. We cannot beat them at range. We need to get inside that ship. Commander, launch all boarding pods. Every single one. We flood that ship with soldiers. We take it from the inside. It was a desperate plan, but desperation was all they had left. Across the Crithian fleet, assault carriers opened their launch bays. Thousands of small armored pods shot out, each one carrying a squad of Crithian soldiers. They were designed to attach to enemy ships and burn through the hull. The soldiers inside wore combat armor and carried plasma rifles. They had trained for boarding actions their entire lives. The pods swarmed toward the Titan like angry insects. The human point defense system shot down hundreds of them. Explosions lit up space as pods were destroyed. But thousands more got through. They clamped onto the Titan's hull with magnetic grips. Cutting torches activated, burning through the thick armor. On the bridge, alarms sounded a different warning. Multiple hull breaches, Lieutenant Fisher called out. Decks 3 through 12. They're boarding us. Monroe had expected this. He touched his communicator. Colonel Grant, they're coming in. Your show now. Deep in the ship, Colonel Lisa Grant smiled. She was a hard woman with scars on her face from a dozen battles. She had been a Marine for 20 years. She had fought in places most people never heard of, and she had been waiting for this. All units, this is Grant, she said over the Marine channel. Enemy is boarding. Execute Defense Plan Alpha. Show these aliens what human Marines can do. The Crithians poured through the breaches in their hull. They expected to find frightened crew members, civilians with light weapons. Instead, they found hell waiting for them. Every breach point had been prepared. The Marines knew exactly where the enemy would enter. They had turned every corridor into a trap, every junction into a killing zone. Sergeant Danny Cruz held the main corridor on Deck 7 with his squad. They wore powered armor that made them faster and stronger. Their weapons were designed specifically for fighting inside a ship. Contact, Cruz said calmly as Crithian soldiers rushed down the corridor. 40 hostiles, engaging. The Marines opened fire. Their kinetic pulse rifles delivered massive impact without punching through the hull. Crithian soldiers fell, their armor cracking under the assault. They tried to return fire, but the Marines were already moving. Using cover, flanking. Corporal Linda Shaw rolled a charge down the corridor. The explosion sent aliens flying. That's for our colonies, she said coldly. All across the ship, the pattern repeated. The Crithians had never faced opponents like this. Humans fought with a combination of discipline and fury that shocked them. They used tactics the aliens had never seen. Every squad worked together perfectly. Every Marine knew exactly what to do. On the bridge, Monroe monitored both battles. The fight outside and the fight inside. Colonel Grant, status? All breaches contained, Captain, Grant reported. Her voice was calm despite the sound of gunfire in the background. They're sending a lot of troops, but my people are holding. Enemy casualties are heavy. Ours are light. Good, keep them busy. We're about to end this. The main graviton cannon had finished recharging. Monroe looked at his tactical display. He selected a target, a massive carrier that was still launching boarding pods. Lieutenant Blake, you have the target, Blake locked on. Ready, Captain. Fire. The carrier joined the growing field of destroyed ships. The boarding pods stopped coming. The battle inside the Titan raged for 2 hours. The Crithians had managed to get thousands of soldiers on board before their carriers were destroyed. Now those soldiers were trapped. They could not retreat. They could not call for reinforcements. All they could do was fight. Sergeant Cruz and his squad had been pushed back from Deck 7. The Crithians had brought up heavy weapons, plasma cannons that could melt through walls, but the Marines adapted. They always adapted. "Fall back to the armory junction," Cruz ordered. "Shaw, set charges on the bulkheads. We're going to collapse the corridor behind us." The squad retreated in good order, never panicking, never running. They moved from cover to cover, always keeping the enemy at a distance. When they reached the junction, Shaw placed the explosive charges exactly where they needed to be. "Charges set," she reported. "Blow them," Cruz said. The explosion brought down half the ceiling. Debris filled the corridor. The Crithians would have to find another way around. That would buy time. Cruz checked his ammunition. Half empty, he looked at his squad. 3 of them were wounded but still fighting. The rest were tired but determined. "Good work, people," he said. "Now let's hold this position." Similar scenes played out across the ship. Every deck had become a battlefield. The Marines used every advantage they had. They knew the ship's layout. They had prepared defensive positions. And they had something the Crithians did not expect. Absolute determination. Private Jake Morris was 19 years old. This was his first combat mission. He was scared, but he did not show it. He held his position in a storage bay on Deck 9. 3 other Marines were with him. They had been ordered to protect the ship's water reclamation system. "Movement," one of the other Marines whispered. "North corridor." Jake aimed his rifle at the doorway. His hands were steady. He remembered his training. Breathe. Aim. Fire. Crithian soldiers rushed through the door. Jake and his team opened fire. The aliens fell. More came behind them. The Marines kept firing. When their rifles ran empty, they reloaded. When the aliens got too close, they used their combat knives. The fight lasted 10 minutes. When it was over, 15 Crithian bodies lay in the storage bay. Jake was bleeding from a cut on his arm, but he was alive. They had held. Colonel Grant moved through the ship, coordinating the defense. She had fought in boarding actions before. She knew how they worked. The key was to keep the enemy divided. Never let them concentrate their forces. Keep them off balance. "All units, this is Grant," she broadcast. "Enemy is losing cohesion. They're running out of ammunition. Keep the pressure on. Do not give them time to regroup." On the bridge, Captain Monroe watched the tactical display. Outside the ship, the Crithian fleet was falling apart. More than half their ships were destroyed or disabled. The rest were scattered across thousands of kilometers of space. "Captain, the enemy is trying to retreat," Lieutenant Fisher reported. "Their remaining ships are turning away." Monroe considered for a moment. He could destroy them all. The Titan had enough firepower, but that would mean thousands more deaths, maybe tens of thousands. He thought about the 7 Marines who had already died defending the ship. 7 was already too many. "Hail them," Monroe ordered. "Let me speak to their commander." The communications officer opened a channel. A Crithian face appeared on the screen. It was Fleet Commander Zareth. He looked defeated, exhausted. "I am Captain Monroe," the human said. "You have lost this battle. Your fleet is destroyed. Your soldiers on my ship are dying. I am offering you one chance. Surrender now. Order your remaining ships to stand down. Tell your soldiers to lay down their weapons. Do this, and I will spare those who remain." Zareth stared at the human. He wanted to refuse, wanted to keep fighting, but he was a military commander. He knew when a battle was lost, and this battle was long over. "What guarantee do I have that you will honor your word?" Zareth asked. "You have my word as an officer," Monroe replied. "Humans do not murder prisoners. We do not kill those who surrender. You will be treated according to the rules of war." Zareth had studied humans. He knew they had rules about how to treat prisoners. Strange rules. Weak rules, he had thought. Now those rules seemed like mercy. "I accept your terms," Zareth said slowly. "I will order the ceasefire." He transmitted the command across all Crithian channels. On every surviving ship, weapons powered down. Inside the Titan, the Crithian soldiers heard the order. Some wanted to keep fighting, but most were relieved. They were trapped on a ship deep in enemy territory. They were running out of ammunition. Many were wounded. Surrender was not shameful when there was no hope of victory. Colonel Grant received the reports from her Marines. "Captain, enemy soldiers are laying down their weapons. We're taking them into custody now." Monroe nodded. "Casualties?" "Final count is 43 wounded, 7 killed," Grant said quietly. "The Crithians lost about 3,000 soldiers. Another 2,000 surrendered, 7 dead." Monroe closed his eyes for a moment. 7 people who had families, who had lives and dreams. He would have to write letters to those families. Tell them their loved ones had died as heroes. It was the hardest part of command. "Secure all prisoners," Monroe ordered. "Make sure they receive medical attention. Follow proper protocols." "Yes, sir." Lieutenant Blake spoke up from his weapons station. "Captain, the enemy fleet is maintaining distance. 50,000 kilometers and holding. They're not moving." "They're waiting to see what we'll do," Monroe said. "They think we might destroy them anyway. Should we pursue, sir?" Monroe shook his head. "No, we've made our point. We've shown them we can fight. Now we show them we can show mercy. That's equally important." He opened a channel to the Crithian fleet. "This is Captain Monroe. You are free to leave. Take your wounded. Take your damaged ships. Return to your empire. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that humanity will defend itself. But tell them also that we do not seek endless war. We will fight when we must. We will show mercy when we can." Zareth's face appeared on the screen again. He looked surprised. "You are letting us go?" "I am letting you go," Monroe confirmed. "But understand this. If you attack human space again, we will not be merciful a second time. We have more ships like this one, many more, and we are building more every day. The age of easy conquest is over. Take that message back to your leaders." Zareth nodded slowly. He was a warrior. He understood the message. The humans could have destroyed his entire fleet. They had the power, but they chose to show restraint. That made them more dangerous, not less. It meant they were not mindless killers. They were thinking opponents. "Strategic opponents. I will deliver your message," Zareth said. The channel closed. The surviving Crithian ships began to collect their escape pods and damaged vessels. It took hours. The Titan waited, weapons ready but not firing. Monroe wanted them to leave, wanted this to end without more death. Finally, the Crithian fleet jumped to hyperspace. They vanished, leaving behind only debris and the memory of their defeat. On the bridge, Lieutenant Fisher let out a breath she did not know she was holding. "They're gone, Captain." Monroe stood up from his command chair. He felt tired, so very tired. "Send a message to New Terra, tell them they're safe. Then set course for Earth." "Yes, sir." Around the bridge, the crew began to relax. They had won. Against impossible odds, they had won. The Titan had faced the entire Crithian armada and survived. More than survived. They had dominated, but Monroe did not feel victorious. He felt sad. Sad for the 7 Marines who would not go home. Sad for the thousands of Crithians who had died. War was necessary sometimes, but it was never good. Chief Engineer Hayes approached the captain. "Sir, we should talk about repairs. We took some damage from their boarding action. Nothing critical, but we need to fix it. How long will repairs take?" "If we work around the clock, about 3 days. We can do it in space. Do not need a shipyard," Monroe nodded. "Make it happen. I want us ready in case they come back." "Do you think they will, sir?" Monroe looked at the empty space where the Crithian fleet had been. "No, not soon. We hurt them badly today. They'll need time to recover, time to think, time to realize the galaxy has changed." 3 days later, the Titan entered Earth's solar system. The crew had used the travel time to repair damage and tend to the wounded. The ship looked battered but functional. Scorch marks covered parts of the hull where Crithian boarding pods had burned through, but the ship was intact. It was still deadly. Word of the victory had already reached Earth. The entire planet was celebrating. After months of terrible news, after watching colony after colony fall, humanity finally had a victory. More than a victory. A triumph. One ship had defeated an entire alien armada. As the Titan approached Earth, it was met by dozens of ships. Civilian vessels, military escorts, news shuttles. Everyone wanted to see the ship that had saved New Terra, that had proven humanity could fight back. On the bridge, Captain Monroe watched the approaching planet with mixed feelings. He was proud of his crew, proud of what they had accomplished. But he kept thinking about those 7 letters he had written. 7 families destroyed, 7 lives ended. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Earth Defense Command," the communications officer said. "They're clearing a path for us. Direct approach to orbit. Acknowledged. Take us in, Helm. The Titan moved through the traffic carefully. Its size made other ships look like toys. Even Earth's largest battleships were small compared to the massive human vessel. It took its position in high orbit, hanging above the planet like a guardian. Captain Monroe, this is Earth Defense Command. A voice said over the channel. Welcome home. You and your crew have earned the gratitude of every human alive. Thank you, Command, Monroe replied. We were just doing our duty. You did far more than that, Captain. Stand by for a shuttle. The Secretary General wants to meet with you personally. Monroe was not surprised. He had expected this. He turned to his first officer, Commander Sam Hughes. Hughes was a quiet man who had served with Monroe for 5 years. Reliable, steady. You have the bridge, Sam. I'm going down to meet with the politicians. Hughes nodded. Good luck, sir. Try not to let them make too many speeches. Monroe smiled slightly. I'll do my best. The shuttle arrived an hour later. It carried Monroe down to the surface to the capital city of Geneva. The streets were packed with people celebrating. When they saw the shuttle, they cheered. Monroe could hear them even through the thick hull. The shuttle landed at the government complex. Monroe was met by an honor guard. Soldiers in dress uniforms. They saluted as he walked past. He returned the salute, feeling uncomfortable with the attention. Secretary General Helen Park waited in her office. She was a small woman in her 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had been in politics for 40 years. She had seen humanity through crises before. But nothing like this. Captain Monroe, she said, standing to shake his hand. Please sit down, Monroe sat. The office was simple. A desk, some chairs, a window overlooking the city. No fancy decorations. Park was known for her practical nature. You've made quite an impact, Captain, Park said. The entire galaxy is talking about the Battle of New Terra. The Crithians have been broadcasting footage to their entire empire. Other species are watching too. Everyone wants to know about this human ship that destroyed an armada. We got lucky, Madam Secretary, Monroe said. If they had studied our technology more carefully, if they had been more cautious, the battle might have gone differently. Perhaps. But they didn't. You won. And now we need to discuss what happens next. Monroe had been expecting this conversation. You want to build more ships? We're already building them, Park said. 6 more Titan-class battleships are under construction. They'll be ready within a year. We're also designing smaller vessels based on the same technology, cruisers, destroyers, carriers. Within 5 years, we'll have a fleet that can defend all of human space. That's a lot of resources, Madam Secretary. A lot of money. Money we'll spend gladly if it keeps our people alive, Park replied. The colonies are sending every credit they can. Private companies are donating materials. Everyone wants to contribute. They've seen what happens when we're defenseless. They won't let it happen again. Monroe nodded slowly. What about the Crithians? Will they come back? Our intelligence suggests they're in chaos. The fleet you destroyed was their primary strike force. Losing it has weakened their entire military. Their empire is having internal problems. Some worlds are considering rebellion. The Crithians thought they were invincible. You proved them wrong. That changes everything. And the other species? How are they reacting? Park leaned back in her chair. It's complicated. Some are afraid of us now. They see the Titan and worry about what else we might build. Others want to form alliances. They've been bullied by the Crithians for years. Now they see an opportunity to push back. What do you want to do, Madam Secretary? I want to build a new order in this part of the galaxy, Park said firmly. One where humanity is not prey, where our colonies are safe, where we have allies we can trust. But I need military power to back that up. I need ships like the Titan, and I need captains like you to command them. Monroe had known this was coming. You want me to stay in command? I want more than that. I'm promoting you to Admiral. You'll oversee the construction and training of our new fleet. You'll help design our military strategy going forward. You'll be the face of human military power. Monroe was quiet for a moment. He was a ship captain. He liked being on the bridge, commanding a vessel. Being an admiral meant politics, meetings, paperwork. But he understood why it was necessary. I'll accept on one condition, he said. What condition? The families of the 7 Marines who died in the battle. I want them taken care of. Full benefits. Education for their children. Jobs if they need them. They gave everything. We owe them everything. Park nodded. Already done, Captain. Or should I say, Admiral? Those families will never want for anything. Neither will the families of anyone else who dies protecting humanity. Monroe stood up. Park stood as well and offered her hand again. Congratulations, Admiral Monroe. You've earned this. They shook hands. Then Monroe was led out of the office. The honor guard escorted him back to the shuttle. As they walked through the government complex, people stopped to stare. Some saluted. Others just nodded with respect. Back on the Titan, Commander Hughes was waiting on the bridge. How did it go, sir? I'm an admiral now, Monroe said. And we're building a fleet, Hughes smiled. That's good news, sir. The crew will be happy to hear it. Monroe looked around the bridge, at the stations where his crew worked, at the view screen showing Earth below them. This ship had changed everything. One vessel had rewritten the rules of galactic power, but Monroe knew this was just the beginning. The Crithians would recover eventually. Other threats would emerge. Humanity needed to be ready, needed to be strong. Get me Colonel Grant, Monroe ordered. And Lieutenant Blake and Fisher and Hayes. I want to talk to all the senior officers. An hour later, they gathered in the conference room. Grant still had bandages on her arms from the fighting. Blake looked tired. They all did. But they were there. I wanted to tell you all personally, Monroe said. The Secretary General is building a fleet. 6 more ships like the Titan, dozens of smaller vessels. And we're going to be training the crews. I need all of you to help. Training duty? Grant asked. Sir, with respect, we're fighters, not teachers. You're both, Monroe replied. And right now humanity needs teachers more than fighters. We need to pass on what we learned. What we did right, what we did wrong. The next generation of officers needs to know how to fight like we fought. Blake nodded slowly. You want us to create a new doctrine? New tactics based on what we learned at New Terra. Exactly. We surprised the Crithians because they didn't understand our technology or our tactics. We can't count on surprise again. We need to be better, smarter, more prepared. Hayes spoke up. What about the Titan, sir? Are we staying with the ship? For now, yes. We'll continue as a training vessel, taking out new officers on patrol missions, showing them how the ship works. But eventually other captains will take command. We'll move to the new vessels as they're completed. The officers looked at each other. It was a lot to process, but they understood the necessity. When do we start? Grant asked. Tomorrow, Monroe said. The first group of trainees arrives at 0800 hours. I want you all to prepare training programs. Focus on what worked at New Terra and what nearly got us killed. They spent the next 2 hours planning. By the end, they had the outline of a comprehensive training program. It would be tough, demanding, but it would produce the best officers humanity could create. As the meeting broke up, Grant stayed behind. Sir, can I speak with you privately? Of course, Colonel. Grant waited until the others left. Then she spoke quietly. I've been thinking about the Marines we lost, about how we could have saved them. Monroe had been thinking the same thing. We did everything we could, Lisa. Sometimes in war, good people die. Even when we do everything right, I know, sir. But I keep running through the battle in my mind, wondering if I could have positioned people differently, given different orders. Stop, Monroe said firmly but kindly. You commanded brilliantly. You saved this ship. Those 7 Marines knew the risks. They did their duty. Honor them by training the next generation to be as good as they were. Grant nodded slowly. Yes, sir. I will. She left. 6 months passed. The Titan had become a training ship as Admiral Monroe had planned. Hundreds of officers had passed through its corridors, learning how to operate the new generation of human warships. The ship had made several patrol runs through human space, showing the flag and reminding everyone that humanity could defend itself. The new battleships were taking shape in Earth's orbital shipyards, the largest construction project in human history. Monroe visited the yards regularly, watching the massive vessels grow. Each one was slightly different from the Titan, incorporating lessons learned from the first battle. Stronger shields, more weapons, better armor, but building ships was the easy part. Building crews was harder. Lieutenant Amy Fisher had been promoted to commander and given command of one of the new ships, the UHS Guardian. She spent her days learning every system, every corridor, every quirk of her vessel. It was similar to the Titan but not identical. She needed to know it perfectly. Lieutenant Blake had been promoted as well. He was now the weapons officer on another new ship, the UHS Defender. He trained constantly, running simulations of every possible combat scenario, The Crithians would not be surprised next time. They would come prepared. Colonel Grant remained on the Titan, training Marine units for all the new ships. She was relentless. Every squad drilled until they could perform perfectly in their sleep. She taught them the lessons learned in blood during the Battle of New Terra: how to fight in corridors, how to defend breach points, how to stay calm when aliens were trying to kill you. Chief Engineer Hayes had the biggest job. He was overseeing the construction of the new ship's reactors and engines. The technology was complex, dangerous. Every reactor had to be built perfectly or it could explode, taking the entire ship with it. Hayes did not sleep much. He could not afford mistakes. Admiral Monroe coordinated everything from his office on Earth. He met with politicians, scientists, military officers. He approved designs. He reviewed training programs. He planned strategy for a fleet that did not yet exist. It was exhausting work. He missed being on a ship, having a simple mission. But this was necessary. One morning, his assistant knocked on his office door. "Admiral, you have a visitor. She says it's urgent. Who is it?" "She wouldn't give her name, sir. But she has high-level security clearance." Military intelligence, Monroe frowned. Intelligence officers made him nervous. "Send her in." A woman entered. She was tall, with dark hair and cold eyes. She wore a civilian suit, but Monroe could tell she was military by the way she moved. "Admiral Monroe, I'm Agent Sarah Mitchell, Military Intelligence Division. We need to talk about the Crithians." Monroe gestured to a chair. "Please sit." "What's the situation?" Mitchell sat down. "Our sources inside Crithian space report that they're planning something. A revenge strike against Earth." Monroe felt his stomach tighten. "When? We're not sure. Could be months. Could be a year. But they're rebuilding their fleet. And they're specifically designing weapons to counter the Titan's technology." "What kind of weapons?" "We don't have details yet. But our analysts believe they're developing something to disrupt our graviton weapons. If they succeed, our main advantage disappears." Monroe leaned back in his chair. He had expected this. "What do you recommend?" "We need intelligence on their research. We need to know what they're building and how to counter it. And we need to accelerate our own ship construction, get the new fleet operational faster. We're already working as fast as we can. We can't rush the construction without compromising safety." Mitchell nodded. "I understand. But Admiral, if the Crithians hit Earth with a prepared fleet, the Titan alone won't be enough to stop them. We need those new ships in space." "I'll see what we can do," Monroe said. "But I won't risk ships exploding because we rushed the work. That helps no one." "Fair enough." Mitchell stood up. "I'll keep you informed as we learn more. But Admiral, be ready. The Crithians are not going to forget what happened at New Terra. They're going to come back, and they're going to be angry." After Mitchell left, Monroe sat alone in his office thinking. He called up the construction schedules on his computer. The first 2 new battleships would be ready in 3 months. The others would follow over the next year. Could they finish faster? He called Hayes. "Pete, I need an honest assessment. Can we accelerate construction on the Guardian and Defender?" Hayes was quiet for a moment. "Maybe by a few weeks. But Admiral, I wouldn't recommend it. These ships are complex. Every system needs to be tested thoroughly. If we rush, we risk failures in combat, I know. But intelligence says the Crithians might be coming back. We need ships ready." "How about this?" Hayes suggested. "We focus on getting Guardian and Defender fully operational. Those 2 plus the Titan give us 3 battleships. Should be enough to defend Earth while the others finish construction." Monroe considered. "All right. Make it happen. Get those 2 ships ready as fast as safely possible." "Yes, sir." Monroe ended the call. Then he contacted all the senior officers: Fisher, Blake, Grant, Hughes, everyone who had fought at New Terra. He called a meeting for the next day. They gathered in a secure conference room. Monroe explained the intelligence report. The room grew very quiet. "So they're coming back," Fisher said. "We knew they would. But we hoped for more time." "We'll have some time," Monroe said, "but not as much as we wanted. Guardian and Defender need to be ready in 3 months. That means accelerating your training programs." Blake nodded. "We can do that. My weapons teams are almost ready now. 3 months is enough." Grant spoke up. "My Marines are ready whenever you need them, Admiral. They're the best trained troops in human history." Hughes, who was still serving as first officer on the Titan, looked concerned. "Admiral, 3 ships against a prepared Crithian fleet. Those aren't good odds." "No, they're not," Monroe agreed. "But they're the odds we have. And we've beaten worse before. The meeting continued for hours. They planned contingencies, discussed tactics, prepared for every scenario they could imagine. By the end, they had a strategy. It was risky, but it was the best they could do. Over the next 3 months, work proceeded at a frantic pace. The Guardian and Defender took shape in orbit. Their crews trained constantly. Every system was tested and retested. Engineers worked 20-hour days. Everyone knew what was at stake. Commander Fisher took the Guardian on its first test flight. The ship handled beautifully. The graviton weapons functioned perfectly. She felt a surge of pride. This was her ship, her command. She would protect Earth with it. Blake ran combat simulations on the Defender until he knew every weapon system intimately. He could fire the graviton cannons in his sleep. He practiced targeting, practiced power management, practiced everything until it was automatic. On the Titan, Grant drilled her Marines endlessly. They practiced boarding defense until every soldier could fight in complete darkness, could hold a corridor against overwhelming numbers, could do it all without thinking. Finally, the day came. Both new ships were declared operational. They took their places in Earth orbit alongside the Titan. 3 massive battleships, humanity's shield against the stars. Admiral Monroe stood on the bridge of the Titan, looking at the other 2 ships on the view screen. Status report all ships. Guardian standing by, Fisher reported. All systems operational. Weapons ready. Defender standing by, came the report from that ship. All systems operational. Weapons ready. Good, Monroe said. Now we wait, and we watch, and when they come, we'll be ready. But the weeks passed with no sign of the Crithians. Intelligence reported continued activity in their space. Ships being built, fleets being organized, but no movement toward human territory. Monroe used the time well. He ran exercises with all 3 ships, practiced formation flying, coordinated attacks, tested communications. The crews learned to work together, to think as one fleet rather than 3 separate ships. Other human colonies watched nervously. They had been reinforced with defense platforms and missile batteries. But everyone knew that if the Crithians came in force, only the battleships could stop them. 4 months after the Guardian and Defender became operational, the alarm finally sounded. Deep space sensors detected a massive hyperspace signature. The Crithians were coming, and they were bringing everything they had. Monroe was in his quarters when the alert came. He was on the bridge in 60 seconds. Report. Large fleet entering the system, Lieutenant Fisher reported from her station. She was back on the Titan temporarily for a coordination meeting. Estimate 200 ships. They'll be in weapons range in 2 hours. Sound general quarters. All ships to battle stations. This is not a drill. Across the 3 battleships, alarms blared. Crews rushed to their positions. Weapons powered up. Shields activated. Marines loaded their rifles and took defensive positions. Monroe opened a channel to all 3 ships. This is Admiral Monroe. The Crithians are coming. They want revenge for New Terra. They think they can beat us because they've prepared. They think they know our capabilities. He paused. They're wrong. We're ready for them. We've trained for this. We've prepared for this. And we're going to show them that humanity does not back down. We protect our home. We protect our people. All ships form up. Battle Formation Delta. Let's show them what 3 human battleships can do. The 3 massive ships moved into position. The Crithian fleet emerged from hyperspace exactly where the sensors predicted. 200 warships, their hulls dark against the stars. They were larger than the ships that had attacked New Terra. Newer designs, built specifically to fight human technology. At the center of the fleet was a massive dreadnought, twice the size of any other Crithian vessel. Intelligence had warned Monroe about this ship. The Vengeance, they called it, built in secret over the past 6 months, designed with one purpose, to destroy human battleships. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Supreme Commander Krath studied the human formation. 3 ships. Only 3. His fleet had 200. The odds were overwhelming. But Krath was not arrogant. He had studied the Battle of New Terra carefully. Had watched the recordings 100 times. The humans had defeated a larger fleet before. He would not underestimate them. What are the energy readings on those ships? Krath asked his sensor officer. The center ship matches the vessel from New Terra, Supreme Commander. The other 2 are similar but not identical. All 3 show massive power signatures. Graviton weapons are confirmed. Krath nodded. Good, that means our countermeasures will work. Activate the dampening field. Across the Crithian fleet, specialized ships powered up new equipment. Energy fields spread out designed to disrupt graviton weapons. Crithian scientists had spent months developing this technology. They believed it would neutralize humanity's greatest advantage. On the Titan, alarms sounded immediately. "Admiral, we're detecting some kind of interference field," Lieutenant Blake reported. "It's affecting our graviton weapon systems. Power output is reduced by 40%. Monroe had expected something like this. "Can we compensate?" Chief Engineer Hayes was already working on the problem. "Give me a minute, Admiral. I think I can reroute power through the secondary capacitors. That should restore most of our output. Do it fast." They're moving into attack position. The Crithian fleet advanced in a careful formation. They had learned from the last battle. No more clustering together where one shot could destroy multiple ships. They spread out, maintaining distance between vessels, made themselves harder targets. Krath opened a channel to the human ships. His face appeared on the Titan's view screen. He was old for a Crithian, his scales gray with age, but his eyes were sharp. "Human Admiral," Krath said. "I am Supreme Commander Krath. Your species has caused great harm to the Crithian Empire. You have destroyed our ships, killed our people. Today we take revenge. Surrender now and we will spare your planet. Fight, and we will burn it to ash." Monroe looked at the alien commander with steady eyes. "Commander Krath, I am Admiral Jack Monroe. Your people attacked our colonies first. You killed millions of innocent humans. We defended ourselves. That is not aggression. That is survival. And we will not surrender. Not to you. Not to anyone." Krath's mandibles clicked with what might have been respect. "I expected that answer. You are brave, Admiral. But bravery will not save you today. We have adapted. We know your weapons. We know your tactics. You cannot win." "We'll see," Monroe said calmly. Then he closed the channel. He turned to his crew. "All ships execute attack pattern Alpha. Target their command ship. Let's cut off the head." The 3 human battleships surged forward. Their engines burned bright as they accelerated toward the enemy fleet. The Crithians had expected the humans to fight defensively, protecting Earth. Instead, the humans attacked. Hayes had managed to restore the graviton weapons to 70% power. Not full strength, but enough. The Titan's main cannon fired first. The beam lanced across space toward the Vengeance, but Krath had prepared for this. His flagship's shields were specially designed to deflect graviton weapons. The beam hit the shields and scattered, dissipating harmlessly. "Their shields are adapted," Blake reported. "The main cannon is not effective." "Switch to railguns," Monroe ordered. "If energy weapons won't work, we'll use kinetic force." All 3 battleships opened fire with their railguns. Tungsten slugs accelerated to tremendous speeds. They punched through the Crithian dampening field. No energy to disrupt, just solid matter moving very fast. The slugs slammed into Crithian ships. Hulls cracked. Shields failed. Ships exploded. The Crithians had prepared for graviton weapons. They had not prepared for this. Krath watched in frustration as his fleet took damage. "Return fire. All ships. Concentrate on the lead vessel." 200 ships opened fire at once. The space between the fleets filled with plasma bolts, missiles, and energy beams. The barrage hit the Titan's shields like a hammer. "Shields down to 50%, Hayes called out. "We're taking heavy damage." "Guardian and Defender, move to flanking positions," Monroe ordered. "Split their fire." Commander Fisher on the Guardian acknowledged and moved her ship to the right. The Defender went left. Now the Crithians had to divide their fire between 3 targets instead of 1. The battle became chaos. Ships on both sides fired continuously. Missiles crossed paths. Energy beams crisscrossed space. Explosions lit up the darkness. It was brutal, violent, unforgiving. On the Guardian, Fisher fought her ship with cold precision. She had learned from Monroe, learned to stay calm, to think clearly even when death was all around. Her crew responded to her steady command. They fired with accuracy, moved with purpose. "Target that carrier," Fisher ordered. "Railguns. Full salvo." The Guardian's weapons fired in perfect synchronization. 20 tungsten slugs hit the Crithian carrier within 2 seconds. The ship broke apart, its structure unable to handle the impacts. On the Defender, Blake coordinated the weapon systems with deadly efficiency. He had spent months planning for this, running simulations, calculating firing solutions. Now it all came together. Missile pods 1 through 6 fire, Blake commanded. Target the ships trying to flank us. Hundreds of missiles launched from the defender. They were smart weapons, able to adjust their course mid-flight. The Crithians tried to shoot them down, but there were too many. Ships exploded across the Crithian formation, but the Crithians were not helpless. They had numbers. And they had experience. They began to adapt to human tactics. Their formations shifted. They concentrated fire on one ship at a time, tried to overwhelm a single target. The Guardian took the brunt of the assault. Its shields failed. Plasma bolts burned into the hull. Alarms blared across the bridge. Hull breaches on decks 4 and 5, Fisher's first officer reported. Engineering is damaged. We've lost the port railgun array. Fisher gritted her teeth. Emergency power to shields. Return fire with everything we have left. The Guardian kept fighting. Even damaged, even bleeding atmosphere from hull breaches, it fired back. Its crew refused to give up. Monroe saw the Guardian taking damage. Titan and Defender moved to support Guardian. Draw fire away from her. The two ships moved to intercept Crithian vessels attacking Fisher's ship. They placed themselves between the Guardian and the enemy. Took hits meant for their sister ship. Hayes was working frantically at his station. Admiral, I found a way to boost the graviton weapons. If I overload the reactor slightly, we can punch through their shields. Will it work? It should. But it's risky. We could damage the reactor. Monroe made the decision instantly. Do it, we need that firepower. Hayes rerouted power systems. Pushed the reactor beyond safe limits. The graviton weapons surged with energy. Ready, Admiral. You have maybe 3 shots before the system overloads. Make them count, Monroe said. Blake, target their flagship. Full power. The Titan's main cannon fired. This time the beam was stronger, brighter. It hit the Vengeance's shields and pushed through. Not completely, but enough. The beam scored the flagship's hull, cutting a deep gouge. Krath felt his ship shake. Damage report. Shields at 40%, Supreme Commander. Hull breach on the port side. They've found a way to overcome our defenses. Krath realized he had underestimated the humans again. They adapted faster than he thought possible. But he still had 200 ships. They only had 3. All ships full assault, Krath commanded. Ignore the damaged vessel. Focus all fire on the ship that just hit us. Destroy it now. The entire Crithian fleet turned toward the Titan. Every weapon fired at once. The barrage was overwhelming. The Titan's shields collapsed. Plasma hit the hull directly. Shields down, Hayes shouted. We're taking direct hits. Hull breaches everywhere. Fire on multiple decks. Monroe felt his ship dying around him, but he did not panic. Damage control teams contain those fires. All hands, brace for impact. On the lower decks, Colonel Grant and her Marines fought fires and sealed breaches. They worked with a desperate speed. Every second counted. Every leak had to be plugged. Every flame had to be stopped. Deck 9 is sealed, Grant reported over the command channel. Moving to Deck 10, but there were too many breaches. Too much damage. The Titan was tough, but it could not survive the concentrated fire of 200 ships indefinitely. Monroe made a hard decision. All ships fall back to Earth orbit. We need support from the defense platforms. The 3 battleships retreated. The Guardian limped along, trailing atmosphere. The Titan was burning. The Defender was the least damaged, so it covered the other 2. The Crithian fleet pursued. They sensed victory, pushed forward eagerly, but they had forgotten about Earth's orbital defenses. As the human ships fell back past the defense platforms, those stations opened fire.